One at a time, and we'll get the job done. Y'all know what to say. On three. 1, 2, 3.
And the home of the Jets.
What's up, everybody? My good friend Joe, I haven't talked to in like 10 years. Where have you been, man?
I've been recovering from our week 1 experience, Tyson. I went to your tailgate, I think, for a good 40 minutes, and in 40 minutes, I think we did 3 shotguns and like 2 or 3 shots. So I'm still recovering from that, and I'm still recovering from our season being over today after the first or second OTA, where Lazard's now down for the season, and so is Aaron Rodgers. So I'm recovering.
Yeah, no, right now we're going to talk 2024 draft, right? We have to how we can get a new quarterback and everything else, because Aaron Rodgers is hurt and the season's over. So
Caleb Williams times.
So first of all, thank you for joining me, and I'm excited because you do a lot of excellent film breakdowns and with players and like free agents draft and like that. But what I want to know is, how does it feel to cover a team that's finally relevant? Like, we're actually like the talk of the NFL. How does it feel for you, just as like with a great website and doing all the content and stuff?
The same as it feels for you. You've been doing it for a little bit. You've been doing it from at least like 2012 or 13, right? Mm-hmm. So you've been doing it for at least a few more years, but you know what it is, like making content and coming on to talk to a bunch of people when they're losing and they're 2-14 and all this shit. It's terrible. So it's really exciting to know that we're going to be able to talk like meaningful Jets football into legitimately December, January, hopefully February. But because a lot of these years, it's like week 2 or 3, it's like, okay, where are we going to fall in the draft? So it's definitely exciting to cover not only a good quarterback, but a Hall of Fame level quarterback coming from the Greg McElroys, Christian Hackenbergs of the world. So yeah. I'm definitely very excited to see a legitimately good team where you have a shot every single game you play.
And the reason why I like talking to you so much is you're so detailed, all your breakdowns, man. Like, I watch enough to be dangerous, but you could break down who's good, who's bad, and tell you why. Like, that's why during the draft, I always bring you on, because you can give a hot take, but back it up with like 10 hours of film study. And the one thing that I'm most interested in is your takes on Aaron Rodgers, dude, because I saw you're doing a breakdown on Aaron Rodgers, and some people are saying, you know what, he's 39 years old, he lost this, he lost that, maybe he can't do this, maybe he can't do that, he had a bad thumb. And then I started watching your stuff, I started getting all fired up. So what are your thoughts on Aaron Rodgers as he comes to the Jets?
He's still really good, man. Like, obviously his 21 season and his 2020 and his 2021 season are better than 22. But you go and watch that, and like just the thread I put up, I haven't done like the full breakdown yet. His receivers dropped easily like 4, 5, 6 touchdowns. Like, Romeo Doubs was pretty bad. Lazard, listen, I know like a lot of people like kind of are blowing him up right now, but he had plenty of drops as well last year. Even Watson, literally his first pass of the year, I'm not sure exactly how many yards it was like 50 yards pass to Christian Watson, dropped it. Like, it would have been a 95-yard touchdown or whatever it was, 90-yard touchdown. So he didn't get help from his teammates. Obviously, the thumb affected him as well. You started seeing some of his passes go a little bit more to the inside, and they didn't necessarily have as much zip on it as it did prior to the thumb injury. But he was still really, really good. Like, we're talking about, what was it, 26 touchdowns and like 10 picks or something like that. And again, some of it was him, but a lot of it was also his teammates and how they wouldn't be able to bring in the ball. His even the tight ends like Tunyon, like I know he got I think a pretty hefty contract with the Bears. He's not very good either. So he didn't have a lot of help. Even if you just take that Rodgers of what he was in 2022 and put him with the Jets and their staff and with Hackett and all the weapons they have, he'll still be a guy who's getting easily over 30 touchdowns and around 10 interceptions in a bad year. But I think he's going to do much better than that. So I'm really encouraged. He still has the arm. There's some balls I put up on Twitter of him throwing like 65 yards while drifting to his left. It's like, how is that even possible at 39 years old? The only thing he really has lost is a little bit of the mobility, but he still has it to some extent. Like, he's not Peyton Manning or Tom Brady towards the end of their careers. He still has some form of mobility. So I'm really, really excited to hear him announce that in the tunnel. Week 1 is going to be absolutely wild. So
No, I'm excited, dude. And that's the whole thing. Like, I know he was banged up a little bit last year, but his ability to manage the game, to maximize the potential of all the Jets' talent on their offense, plus to hack it. I mean, dude, it's like, how can you not be excited? Like, this offense should be high flying because you figure Garrett Wilson did a lot of really good things with shitty quarterback play, right? He was scratching and clawing and doing all kinds of things. You add him with Aaron Rodgers, who can actually get him the ball in space, throw him open, do whatever he has to do. I mean, the sky's the limit for Garrett Wilson in this offense. Would you agree?
Yeah, dude. Like at the end of the day, he had 1,100 yards with, like you said, shitty quarterback play. The worst quarterback play. So, yeah, there was plenty of times where he was missed. You're looking at a guy who I think is at least a top 10 receiver this year in the NFL. So you have to be really excited. Now, obviously, how much is the ball ran? How much are guys like Conklin and Uzama, all the other weapons targeted? So it's hard to put like a definite stamp on, okay, this is what he's going to get this year, but you could easily see him getting 1,500 yards. Like the dude's an absolute stud. He's really unorthodox with his route running, which I think DJ Reed brought up today, but it's really true. I studied a lot of receivers and things like that, and there's some breaks and some footwork that I haven't really seen around the NFL. So he's confusing to play against just in terms of his route running, and then he's obviously ultra competitive, which we all love. He's ultra explosive. So you're looking at a legit wide receiver one, and obviously Aaron Rodgers comes in and calls him Devontae Adams, which is maybe a little bit of a reach right now, but he at least gave him that respect where he's in that tier of receiver in terms of what he can be. Now, is he going to be that in year two? We don't necessarily know, but yeah, he's a legit top 10 stud receiver. I don't see him going anywhere.
Now, you mentioned Lazard earlier. Now, what do you think Lazard brings the offense? Because he does have some drop potential. He does that, but he also has ridiculous chemistry with Aaron Rodgers, knows the offense. I mean, what would be your breakdown of Lazard?
Yeah, so he's similar to Corey Davis in terms of like, okay, they're a little bit bigger. Obviously, Lazard's a little bit bigger than Davis. He's more of a vertical receiver than Corey Davis. Corey Davis is a guy at Tennessee who won a lot more on like crossing routes and digs. So he was a contested guy, but over the middle, and obviously contested ball over the middle or deep balls over the middle, whether it be a post or an over, is a little bit different than catching a ball over the shoulder on nines and things like that. So Lazard's a really good vertical receiver just in terms of like stacking guys, keeping them off of his body, and then kind of separating late for the ball. So he's good at those type of things. Obviously, red zone as well, just because of his size. He's good at that. But people are going to get frustrated. Like at the end of the day, people crap on Corey Davis and his drops. You're going to get more frustrated with Alan Lazard. Lazard is not. His hands are not great. He's obviously not the most dynamic or explosive guy in the world, but he has good chemistry with Rodgers. He's a bigger guy. He's a good vertical guy. He's a good chain mover just because of his body and his ability to box guys out. He's good in the red zone because of that size again. And people almost like underrate chemistry with receivers and things like that. And having a couple of guys come over with Rodgers from Green Bay to help not only Rodgers, but the other receivers that can still the offense and things like that. It's really good for the squad. Now, I don't think he's like some stud receiver two or anything like that. I think he's more of like a good number three. So I think he's solid. He's frustrating at times with his hands. He's not going to offer you much yak, but he has that good chemistry with Rodgers, and he offers something to the offense in terms of his vertical ability. And then we have a comment to AC. So yeah, good blocker. And it's true. Some people have compared him to Hines Ward. I'd pump the brakes on that a little bit because Hines Ward is like the best blocker I've ever seen in my life. Him and Corey Davis are on a similar level. Corey Davis is probably a little bit better, but it's an added element to the offense that people aren't going to really think about. You talk about receivers, like it's like automatic, like, oh, who cares about wide receiver blocking? But in an offense, which obviously is predicated on a lot of wide zone pin and pulls, you're asking your receivers to block linebackers, to block safeties, to block the ends. It's a really big part of the offense, so it offers something in that sense as well. So solid guy, but I wouldn't be too excited.
Now, the player I'm most interested to hear about is Nicole Hardman, because that kind of guy the Jets haven't had in forever, man, with that kind of explosive playmaking ability where it's like, get him the ball in space, he's gone. I mean, legitimately he can just take off. He can do like the jet sweeps, all kinds of stuff. What are your thoughts on Hardman in this offense?
Yeah. So when he was signed, it seemed like people were talking about him as not a Corey Davis replacement, but kind of like people were talking about him like he was going to be a top three guy with the Jets. If you look at him like that, then you're going to be a little bit disappointed. If you're looking at him more of like a Braxton Berrios upgrade, that's how you should be looking at him. A gadget guy, a vertical guy. Obviously, Berrios didn't really offer the vertical element to his game. And Nicole Hardman, he's not necessarily the best route runner. He's actually super raw in route running, but just because of his speed, like you have to respect him. So he's gonna open up the offense just because of his speed, just because of the respect of the end rounds and the jet sweeps. Now, hopefully, our are, coach builds off of, because the problem last year with LaFleur was you see all these end rounds, you see all these jet motion, all that stuff. They never threw to him. So you're taking a guy out, one of the 11 out of the play, and no team's going to respect it because you never build off of that concept, where guys like McVay are so good because they'll bait that, that end around, and then they'll actually throw it to that end around. And then people start to adjust. Okay, he's going to throw it to the end around, and then you're expecting that end around to get thrown to. Now there's a post ball over your head for 45 yards. And LaFleur never did that. So I'm hoping to see Hackett do more of that than LaFleur did. But if you're looking at him as a punt returner, a kick returner, I don't think he's great at either one of those things, but he's good enough just because of his explosive ability, a yak guy, a vertical threat, then that's fine. If you're looking at him as a starting receiver, like a starting level guy, you're going to be disappointed because he's very, very raw with his route running. Like, at the end of the day, I know people will say, oh, he's going to explode in this offense with Aaron Rodgers. Listen, like, he was in an offense with Andy Reid and with Patrick Mahomes, so he can't explode with those guys. Maybe he is what he is, and I think that's fine. A guy who's going to get, however many rushes this year and maybe see, 40, 50 balls his way, but for $4, $5, $6 million, whatever it is, I think he adds an element to this offense which we really haven't had in terms of that speed threat, because he's probably a top 10 receiver in terms of his speed on the field. So it's exciting because at least it makes defensive coordinators legitimately worry about the Jets offense, not because he's Devontae Adams, but you have to cover for that speed. You just have to.
So now, what role do you think the tight ends will play in this offense? Because Ruckert didn't play it all last year, which was a crime. But then you have Conklin was very inconsistent. So many drops were driving you crazy. And Uzuma became like a blocker. They didn't really get a lot. Yeah. Do you think they're going to do a lot more with Aaron Rodgers now? Because they both have pass catching ability.
Yeah, I'm on the Conklin train. A lot of people. And it sucks for Conklin because you know how Jets fans are. 1, 2, 3 games kind of makes your entire career, and it's going to be really hard to bounce back from that. Conklin had maybe 3 or 4 drops in 4 years at Minnesota. He comes to the Jets, in his first 3 games, he has 3 drops, 4 drops, and a fumble. It's like people are automatically going to hate him. But I really like him as a route runner. I really like him as a receiving threat. And even last year, he had a down year. I think he was 9th or 10th in total receiving yards at the tight ends with Zach Wilson and what we had. So this offense isn't necessarily predicated on tight ends, because it's a lot of quick game and it's a lot of vertical threats built off of that quick game as well. But with that being said, there are still plenty of times, Tunyon is a guy, again, who got overpaid in my opinion, but he's still had a couple of touchdowns in the last couple of years. And you saw their tight ends get plenty of targets where he'll at least be able to make an impact on the team. So I like Conklin as a route runner. I like him as a blocker. I think he had a little bit of a down year as a blocker last year, but there was reps of him in with the Vikings legitimately blocking Chandler Jones one-on-one, which you don't want to do that with tight ends, but if you have to, it is what it is. So I think he's going to be a guy who Jets fans are talking about towards the end of the year and saying, okay, maybe we underrated this guy a little bit. So I really like Conklin. Uzama was an overpay from the jump. It just is what it is. Now, how much do you value that team camaraderie and the chemistry? That's what he's big for. But he's an average at best blocker, both in the run game and the pass game. As a receiving tight end, he doesn't offer too much. Like, you can't just assume because of size he's a good red zone guy. There's a reason he doesn't have a lot of touchdowns, and it's because he's not necessarily the best route runner. And you have to be good at route running in the red zone. Just look at what Garrett Wilson did against the Browns. Like, you don't have to be big to completely demolish a guy and catch a wide open ball. And Uzama doesn't really have that route running ability. So I don't think he's going to be a huge factor to the offense, minus some yak. I would say that's the only thing he does better in the receiving game than a guy like Conklin. And then Ruckert's going to be interesting too, because I don't really know what they're planning on doing with him, because that last Miami game, which was dreadful to watch, he was deployed as a fullback and an H-back a lot, and he did good at that. But with that being said, that was one game. So are you going to rely on him to do that year round? Because if you watch Keith Carter's offense with the Titans, he was pretty 12, 22 personnel heavy. Now 11 personnel is always going to win, but he was definitely heavier into using fullbacks and in the running game. So I'm curious to see if the Jets have to carry a guy like Baldwin, or could a guy like Jeremy Ruckert fill that role? And is that one game sample size enough? So I think he might maybe use like that. And then past that, Zach Kuntz was something that day. Like, he's 10 RAS score and all that stuff. But if you're that athletic, you must suck at something to be in the 7th round. So, so he's probably going to be like a redshirt year, maybe practice squad. Maybe he's tight end 4, but we can't expect this guy to be an absolute stud. So it's an exciting room just because I think it was underutilized last year. And you know what it is, Tyson. Like, a lot of people go to, Conklin, he sucks because, go to PFF and he had this drops, he had this many stats, but it's hard to get stats when Zach Wilson's throwing you the ball and he struggles over the middle. He struggles at everything, to be completely honest. But I'm expecting a lot out of Conklin. He's my most underrated Jet, I think, going into this year. Yeah, no, I agree. I was a huge fan of him when he came here, and I was so frustrated. I'm like,
like you said, we saw things that he didn't do in Minnesota. I'm like, he didn't drop these passes. Like, I was so excited. They're like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm like, no, I'm telling you, he's a good player. But it's like,
he's a good player.
So you go to the wide receivers, the tight ends. The running back room is interesting because Breece Hall, like I keep saying, I wouldn't rush him back. It's great that he's running. He's not practicing, but he's back on the field moving around. I want Breece Hall at 100% at the end of the season. I'm not worried about the beginning of the season. So if you have to sit out a few games, I really don't care about that. What are your thoughts on the rest of the running back room? Because they added an explosive running back in Izzy. You got Michael Carter. You got Zonovan Knight. Do you think would they go out and go maybe get like a Ezekiel Elliott or a Fournette, or do you kind of stay with what you have right now, assuming that Breece Hall can be back by, if not week 1, the first couple weeks?
Yeah, I completely agree with you. Like, you don't rush Breece out there at 85, 90%. Like, just let him completely heal up because we need him to win games just to get to the playoffs, but let's make sure he's healthy in February, February 4th, Super Bowl day. Let's make sure he's healthy on that day. But the running backs room is interesting because it's obviously like Breece Hall had an amazing 3 or 4 games to end it, but we still have to realize it was 3 or 4 games. So I with that being said, I still do think he's going to be a stud, but he didn't prove it for a year or two. So we have to see him really kind of take the ball and run with it in terms of like the mantle we're putting him on as Jets fans already. And I think he will. So I'm excited for him, but again, how long does it take him to get back to full form? And you hear about ACLs all the time. It takes that full year to get healthy, to really beat yourself again. So does it take him that full year? Don't really know. Michael Carter in his first year, he was a tackle breaking machine. Like the guy never ever went down on first contact, and that's all he did last year was go down on first contact. Yeah. So people blame it on the offensive line, people blame it on the vision, people blame it on whatever they wanted to blame it on, but he just wasn't the same player physically. So that leads me to believe maybe there was some type of nagging injury that he just did not tell the Jets about. And I could be wrong. Maybe I'm just a complete idiot. But he completely changed as a player from year to year. It wasn't anything but that. So I'm hoping he can bounce back because we were all excited about Michael Carter, even going into the draft last year. Like, oh, he's a solid running back 1, and now it's like, could he even be running back 2 at this point? And based on how he played last year, he wasn't. Like, let's just be honest. Now I know a part of that's the offensive line, but still, he just wasn't breaking any tackles. But I'm excited for him. I think he'll bounce back somewhere towards the median. Maybe not as good as year 1, maybe not as bad as year 2, but even in the middle of that, he's still a solid backup running back. Zonovan Knight, he exploded Vikings game, some other games towards the latter part of the year. But it's really hard to evaluate running backs when they're running behind the offensive line that the Jets were toting out there. So I think he's going to be better this year as well, just because of Aaron Rodgers. And at the end of the day, the offensive line was bad. But then you also had defensive coordinators who, no shit, they're going to take 8 or 9 guys and stack them in a box and say, hey, make Zach Wilson beat us. And obviously he couldn't. So I think a lot of guys in the offense are just going to benefit a lot from Aaron Rodgers. I think that's Zonovan Knight. And obviously with Carter and Breece as well. And then with Izzy, he's a fifth round guy, really, really explosive. People compare him like Mostert and Tevin Coleman, and I get both of those. I really, really hate player comparisons because I get into the really nitty gritty of it, and every single player is different. But you could see him as like a Tevin Coleman light type of player with the Falcons, not Tevin Coleman with the Jets, because a little bit taller, a little bit of an upright runner. But if he sees a lane, dude, like he is absolutely gone. Now he's not going to make his own lanes. That's a problem I have with his game. I don't think his vision's the best. I don't think he's the best at pressing a hole. Let's say pressing the C gap a little bit to cut back to the B gap, make that linebacker jump that C gap obviously incorrectly. He's not that type of guy. He'll take what's blocked up for him, but he might have a couple runs in a row where it's 1 yard, 1 yard, 1 yard, 67 yards. Like that's the type of running back he is. And then with him, I know he didn't have a lot of pass production at Pitt, but he's a guy who, he's not going to run angle routes and snake routes and all these different, types of routes that running backs are getting involved with nowadays. But he's a guy who just on a dump off, he could take it 60 yards. So he's an exciting player. I'm excited to see him, but I completely agree with you. Like Breece has to be healthy. And would you like to add a guy? Sure. But at a certain point, like how many offensive linemen are going to carry? How many defensive linemen are going to carry? Because you're carrying at least 10 of each, right? At this point. So can you keep a fifth running back and a fullback? Is Jeremy Ruckert playing fullback? So just due to roster gymnastics, I can't see them bring in a guy.
Yeah, I'm really interested about Zonovan Knight, man. He's putting on some size too, and he's just so explosive. He's so physical, and he's just learning, man. He's just like scratching the surface. So I'm hoping he gets a chance to see, kind of shine more, especially if Breece Hall can't play. So he covered all the skill positions. Now, this is going to be a controversial topic because this name gets everybody riled up a little bit. We got to go offensive line, and Mekhi Becton, who now looks like a tight end, he's dropped crazy amount of weight. He's probably in the best shape of his life. Comes out and says, you know what? I'm a left tackle, man. kind of question the coaching staff, which I didn't like that at all too much. I'm like, you haven't played in 2 years, dude. Like, because like the Jet fans are on your side, man. Like everybody's rooting for you. You look great. Doing that kind of shit's kind of not a good look. Now you're like, dude, you're gonna talk your way off the team because that's an element you don't need. But how do you handle this, man? I mean, is it really truly an open competition? If you're playing your best 5, you have to figure Dwayne Brown's one of them, and Dwayne Brown's not playing right tackle, right? Or am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. The guy has played, and people compare the Becton situation to the Brown situation, but Brown's played left tackle in the league for what, 10 years now, 11, 12 years. So you can't compare a guy in year 4 who hasn't really played a lot to a Brown. So Brown, yeah, he's not going to move. And the Becton thing, it is interesting because year 1, 13 starts at left tackle. But how many of those, even out of the 13, he came out of at least, 2 or 3 of those games for injuries. So you had a guy who was often injured in year 1. Year 2, listen, he was getting beat up in camp a little bit by Lawson. We heard all that. It is what it is. Then he goes out and gets injured because GVR is just a complete scrub and he got rolled up on, which happens. But then the next and he's out for the year, which sucks. I think you were in Carolina, as was I, and that's not the best situation to see happen. It is what it is. We're used to it as Jets fans. And then the next year he comes back, and it didn't seem like he meshed very well with the coaching staff last year. You saw some stuff coming out, and I get the fact that he's like 342 or something like that right now.
Yep.
And it's great. He lost 50 pounds. But he shouldn't have to lose 50 pounds to get to 340. Like he came in last year at about 400-ish pounds or whatever people were saying is around there. And just the way that this coaching staff and the GM like preach team, and we want team guys and we want leaders and all this stuff. You have Brown, who could have just easily sat out last year, and he was playing with the excuse my French, I know you guys curse, but a fucked up shoulder, and he still played, and hopefully he's better this year. AVT would literally, I put it on Twitter the other day, he would play corner if you asked AVT to, didn't bitch at all. Yep. And people will say, oh, well, I'm sure he's comfortable doing that stuff. You're not comfortable moving from right guard to right tackle to left guard in the NFL nowadays. It's really hard to ask for.
George Fant too.
Didn't hear a word about him. Yeah, Fant was moving around. Fant was brought in to be a left tackle initially. Then they brought in Becton, and he played right tackle, and you didn't really hear him bitching too much. So I don't think the coaching staff loves the guy. Now, I'm encouraged the fact he's 340. But like you said, the best offensive line is Becton at right tackle. And Saleh today, he kind of steered away from it, but it seemed like he said, like, listen, go earn it. But at the end of the day, I think he plays right tackle. Now, if he refuses, that's a problem all in itself. So I think he does end up at right tackle. I just cannot see him getting signed after this year. Nope. With the injuries, like, because either way, either he gets injured again and then we don't want to resign because of the injuries, or he balls out and he's going to ask for a ton of money, and the Jets are going to say, listen, at the end of the day, you had 3 years of often injury, if not missing the entire year. We're not going to pay you off of 1 year. Like right. That's 1 out of 4 is not a big enough sample size for us. So I don't think that they're going to sign him. And just based on his personality, there's people bitching the other day that he was wearing sunglasses at practice. Who gives a shit about that? Yeah. But with that being said, like you said, the coaching staff is all about like handling it behind, closed doors and all that stuff. And I know he had the injury to the right knee and he was bitching about that and whatever. Handle it behind the scenes. Like that's what they want. That's what you're supposed to do. And we don't know what was lost in translation. Like, you know what it is. There's one side, the other side, and there's a truth in the middle. So we heard his side. Was he talking about his injured knee to the offensive line coach? Was it a doctor? Yeah. Was he laboring a little bit last year because he was 400 pounds? And then maybe the Jets coaches were like, push it, dude. Like, you're 400 pounds. And he was kind of related to an injury. So we don't know exactly what happened. I can tell you that they weren't, obviously thrilled with him last year. And now you have this where he's coming out, I am a left tackle. Saleh kind of brushes it off. And then 2 weeks later, he's saying it again. I'm not, I am a left tackle again or whatever. So he was getting on my good side with the pictures of him working out and all that stuff. Because at a certain point, I don't have to like every player. Like, I can root for you to do well in the field, but I'm not going to like your personality. Like, I can 100%. Root for Becton on the field, but not like his personality. To me, I don't know if it's just because of who I am, whatever, but like you posting the big bust stuff and all that stuff on Twitter, like to me, it's just like, what are you doing? So he wasn't on my great side last year. And then this year, I saw him interacting with people. I was like, okay, awesome. Like, Becton's really making his way to getting on the good side of Jets fans. And then this shit happens again. I'm like, oh my God, dude, come on. So I'm concerned about what his mindset is, but I think he ends up at right tackle. Brown's not going to play there, and there's no way you could tell me that playing Becton at left tackle and then one of Mitchell or a Billy Turner at right tackle is the best offensive line for us. So
and having Dwayne Brown sit and do nothing, that's just doesn't make it. Yeah, like, I'm with you, dude. Like I was kind of down on Becton too, because I was at training camp last year. I watched him struggle, and I'm like, dude, and the whole weight loss thing bothered me too. I'm like, dude, like, they're just, we all know what it was. Like when you come into camp out of shape, it shows. If you're throwing up, you're doing this, you're doing that. That's you, dude. Conditioning and your physical fitness is you. It's not the coaches, not your teammates. That's on you to be in shape at the right time. You weren't. Then you had to grind through the dog days of summer. You couldn't. You're thrown up. You get hurt. Unfortunate. And it was like all this positivity is building around him. And then this shit happens. And I'm like, come on, dude. Like, there's so much, like, everybody in Jets Nation is happy. We're rooting for everybody. And you don't need distractions. You don't need negativity, especially for somebody who hasn't played in 2 years, right? Especially when you have a guy, Dwayne Brown, who's a respected leader, dude. They gave him the Selfless Warrior Award last year. They actually created an award for him because he played through his injury and all the things he'd done. And then you're like, you know what? You're going to take a job away from him because you want to play left tackle? It ain't going to happen, man. So, I don't know. I'm hoping this gets kind of cleared out, but it seems like it's going in the wrong direction for some reason. I get that bad feeling. But you go from the tackle position to the center position, which is really interesting because McGovern came back on a real cheap deal. I thought he was going to be gone. I didn't want him back. But now you got him. And then they got Tippmann, though, which was interesting because Joe Douglas had his choice of the litter. He had his pick of whatever center he wanted. He chose Tippmann. What'd you think about that?
Yeah, I'll just never understand the NFL in terms of contracts sometimes. Like, how does a guy like Connor McGovern, who, regardless of what you think about him, I think he's in the range of like an average starting center in the NFL. He gets $1.2 million, and then Wes Schweitzer's like a career backup and all that stuff gets like $3 million. I have no idea how it works, but regardless, it was a great move before the draft because it gives you ultimate flexibility. Like the contract is not big enough where it prohibits you from drafting a center. But it was great insurance at the same point. And just Tippmann in general, him learning from a guy like Rodgers, and you hear at college, he called the line protections, he called all the adjustments, stuff like that, which is great. You want your center to do that. But now he already has that knowledge, and now you're backing that up with, okay, you're going to play under Aaron Rodgers for 2, hopefully 3 years. So I'm really excited about what he's going to learn from Aaron Rodgers, just from the mental side of the game and looking at fronts and looking at blitzes and what to expect. So I'm really excited about that. I think he does end up winning the job against a McGovern because at a certain point, yeah, cooking on the bench is sometimes a good thing, but you really want to see the fire to like really develop as a center. So unless McGovern's like significantly better than him, even if Tippmann's a little bit behind him, I just play Tippmann and get him that experience. Obviously, if he struggles, then you have McGovern who can also play backup guard, which is a great thing as well because he's done that in his career a little bit. But I like it. Again, McGovern I think is an average level guy. Tippmann is a guy who 6'6". You see the athleticism, you see his ability and pass protection. There's some things I can get into about like he needs to work on. He plays too on his toes. His hands don't refit like they should. He ends up on the ground too much. There's sometimes he chases blocks a little bit too much where he puts himself out of position to like drop his post and power step and get back in on side. I'm not trying to get into all that stuff, but he has some technical things he needs to work on from his game. But I really like him in terms of a fit into the offense. Good power, really good athlete. He really fits the wide zone and the pin and pull system that we're going to be running quite often really, really well because he's a freak for his size in terms of his
Does his height bother you at all or no?
So the height thing bothers me like it to a certain extent, right? Because like if you're going to be tall and you don't play with knee bend, then it's going to be really, really shitty. But he's tall and he plays with proper knee bend, so for the most part, it's not a problem. But with that being said, he's still really tall. Where some guys like let's say an Al Woods type guy, 330, squattier guy, they're just based on your center of gravity, there's going to be some times where guys get under you. It's not necessarily about how high your hat or how high your helmet is. It's really about your hips and getting your hips under guys. You do the fighting stuff and all that. You know what it is. Low man wins, and it's really the hips and all that stuff and not bending from the waist. And for the most part, he does well at that. Now he does end up on the ground a little bit too much because of his height. There's some times where his feet stall on contact, whether that be in the pass game or the run game, where he ends up just leaning and not really bringing his feet under him and really lifting a guy. The running game, a lot of people think it's about push. It's really about lift. In the running game, he doesn't really do that enough for me, and he'll end up on his face and not refitting your hands yet into proper position. But overall, there are very little things technically that he has to work on, but he has a really high ceiling in terms of his athleticism. And if you are going to come into the league a little bit raw, I'd much rather have it be in the pass game than the run game because I'm not trying to get Aaron Rodgers hit by from a rookie center. So I really like the pick in terms of the athleticism. I think he has some ways to go in the run game and just developing there. But overall, I really like what he is. For a second round center and the first center off the board.
Yeah, I kind of get the feeling he's going to start as well. I think he beats out McGovern. I think the Jets want him to start too. Like that's your anchor. Let them all grow together and let them be for the next few years play together. So now you go to the opposite side of the ball where There's a guy that's currently holding out where he's not attending OTAs. Not really a big deal. I don't really care about that until training camp starts. But the argument is he worth a big, fat new contract, probably $100 million? That's Quinn Williams. What is your take on Quinn, man, who playing on all-pro levels, getting better every year, explosive, still ridiculously young? When it was funny because some people don't want to pay him now, but when he wasn't on the field last year, you're freaking out like, get him on the field, we need him. So what is your take on Quinn Williams?
Yeah, a really good player. Now, obviously, some people will question the production years 1 through 3, but he's also changed defensive systems. His first 2 years, it was more of a 3-4. The last year, obviously, adjusting to more of a 4-3. And he was dominant. He had 12 and a half sacks, I believe it was last year. So he was really good last year. And a lot of people talk about the contract, and he actually liked the tweet. I forget the Twitter account he liked it from, but apparently they're not necessarily bargaining over, or they're not discussing the money, but it's the years paid. It's the years. Yep. So what I think is happening is Quinn probably wants, like, people probably think he wants like 5 years. I think he probably wants 3 years. And then he gets to make another splash at 28 years old. But he has plenty of good years left. So I think that's what they're fighting for. Where maybe the Jets want 5, maybe he wants 3, and they fall in the middle at 4 years or something like that. But I think he gets done. $25-ish million a year. At the end of the day, like, we haven't had anybody to really re-sign as Jets fans. We have nobody to be excited about. Our last guy is Jordan Jenkins. We signed to a second contract. Like, Thomas Hennessy is now our longest tenured Jet. We just really haven't done that. So when you have a guy who last year was legitimately a top 3 defensive tackle in the league, and to me, just based on watching, I'll always take interior pressure over exterior pressure. It just really, really fucks up your whole game plan when you have a guy in the interior. Now, it's a little bit easier to game plan for an interior guy because obviously there's more guys around him. But when you have a really dominant guy, like look at Tom Brady, he did not like that interior pressure. I'm not comparing anybody to Tom Brady, but it screws up quarterbacks because you can always step up and away from edge pressure. You have that interior guy with those edge rushers. It's just it's a shit sandwich for a quarterback, and he's a really good player. Year 3, he's a little bit tentative. I don't think he's as powerful as year 4. But this year, he really just took a step forward in being aggressive. At Alabama, he was obviously a strong player, but he was more of a technical player at Alabama, and what he did a lot, it's called a soft stance. So instead of exploding off the ball and through gaps, he would come off the ball and read sets and then adjust to those sets. Where at the NFL level, you can't necessarily let guys dictate the rep to you because they're just going to fuck you up. Like, they're all so good. So he got a little bit more decisive this year. I think that's where he really, really took a leap, just decisiveness. So I'm really excited about him. And they have to bring him back. $25 million. It'll happen. I'm just not sure for exactly how long. I prefer it to be 5 years, but it seems like Q wants potentially 3 right now. But yeah, you have to bring that dude back. Yeah,
to me, it's like, and everybody's discussing like his first couple of years. I'm like, you're not really paying for his past, you're paying for his future. Like, you're paying for what he can be in his defense going forward, and he can become one of the best defensive players in football. He's got that kind of potential. So you got to keep him. The Jets lose Rankins and Shepard. You mentioned Woods before. But you need that run stopper in the middle, dude. That's the one thing where the Jets defense at times kind of got a little bit shaky with the run defense. They can attack the pass rusher. I mean, attack the quarterback, but run defense gets a little sketcy. What do you think about Woods, man?
Yeah, and that's something too with like the Quinnen thing, and it's just interesting. We can talk about the defensive line and allocation of resources a lot, because at the end of the day, if Q is playing 60% of the reps, is he worth $25 million? Like, you usually see guys who are playing 80, and obviously you're going to pay him. I'm just saying it's kind of interesting. Like, JJ was a first round pick last year, and you're getting about 20. I think it's like 27% of the reps for a first round pick. You're paying Huff, who's I think he got like 20% of the reps last year. Now you have McDonald. So at what point are you investing too much capital into a small snap percentage? That's an interesting kind of topic with the defensive line, but it is what it is. Now with the defensive line, there's something, and I like Al Woods, but Robert Saleh, this would be something that I'm really, really going to be critical of if I don't see this change this year, because if you're bringing in Al Woods, they cannot do the full-blown rotations like they did last year. Nope. Last year with the whole, hockey lineup changes, they cannot do that, because you cannot have Quentin Jefferson in there on 3rd and 1 on the goal line, because, that's how our rotation works. So Saleh's going to have to change up, plugging guys in just individually into different situations, because Quentin Jefferson should never be in a run situation, and Al Woods should never be in a pass situation. Now, obviously, I think maybe Quentin Jefferson's a little bit underrated in the run game. He was asked to 2-gap a little bit more than I thought he should have been with the Seahawks last year, so more of a penetrating role. I don't think it'll be as bad, but still, Saleh has to change the rotation this year. And it was the same thing with receivers a couple of years ago too. Like, we'd be in the red zone and be like not Andre Roberts. He was a couple of years before that, but it'd be like our 4th, 5th, and 6th. I think it was like Barrios, Jeff Smith, and like Mims were in for like 2 red zone plays. I'm like, what? Why is Elijah Moore on the bench right now? Like, what are we doing here? So they absolutely have to change that, and that's something to be really, really critical of Saleh if they don't change that in their defensive line rotation. But in terms of the guys, I like Quentin Jefferson as a pass rusher again, maybe a little bit underrated in the run game just because he was really, really miscast last year. And then Al Woods, he's a guy who, he could push the pocket a little bit. He has some bull rush to him, but he rushes really high. He's a guy. He's just that Chris Jenkins, Snacks Harrison type of guy, and they need that because last year they got gashed, and that was part of the problem too. Obviously, Rankins leaves and all that stuff, but you had rotations where Nathan Shepard and Solomon Thomas were at the same time. It's like, what are we doing here? So we'll see. But I like Al Woods a lot for what he is if he's deployed right. But is he?
Yeah, and then you go to all the pass rushers. The Jets went from having no pass rushers to actually having an abundance of them, which is a great thing. But one of the guys who I'm glad is staying is Carl Lawson. They restructured his contract. He obviously wants to stay here. He took less to stay here. You got government sent them to the contract. But what are your thoughts on Lawson, man? I think he's a great mentor, great leader. He's got a great burst. He was obviously hurt last year. We didn't know that, but he did some really good things, especially in the fourth quarter. He had some big stops. What do you think if he's, assuming he's healthy, he can still have a pretty big impact on this defense, no?
Yeah, and like this is another team guy. You see him take a pay cut, right? I think he's earning 9, but up to 12 this year with incentives. So 3 years of incentives, and that's obviously great. And just like with Breece Hall, you talk about ACLs and Achilles and all these injuries. It usually takes that extra year. And not only was he injured, but he was re-injured in the offseason. So he really had a tough time coming back. So I think he's going to be a better player. I don't think he's ever going to be a guy who's racking up like 15, 16 sacks, but he's a guy who I think could be an 8 to 10 sack guy. And he's always been up there for pressures throughout his career. And that's part of that is the fact that he has shorter arms. He necessarily can't always separate at the top of the arc. But part of that is also, if you look at when he was really productive with the Bengals, like there was not many pass rushers around him. So the quarterback could just run away from him because there was no other pressure. So he didn't really step into a lot of sacks. So I still think you're looking at a really productive edge rusher. For the Jets, obviously a ton of power, a ton of burst. You wish the arms were a little bit longer, but it is what it is, technically sound, and obviously a team guy. Like we all loved Lawson a couple of years ago. The video panning down to the Jets chant and all that shit. Like we love the guy, and it was heartbreaking to see him injured with that joint practice with Green Bay. But I think this year we're gonna get much more of what we thought Lawson would be when we initially signed him. So I was happy that he renegotiated the contract. Now, again, is there too many resources at the defensive end spot? That's a topic for a different day.
Yeah, so now you have Lawson. The use of Bryce Huff last year drove me absolutely insane because every time he was on the field, he made a play, but he wasn't on the field enough, especially in crucial times where like whether Lawson was tired or whatever it was like, get him on the field, man. Like that guy has too much talent to do that. So what are your thoughts on Huff and Jermaine Johnson, who it's like the Jets first rounders, there's no pressure on them, dude, because there's guys ahead of them that are, being asked to make big time plays. So what are your thoughts on those two guys? Yeah,
it's crazy that JJ was drafted in the first round last year, traded up for, and he's like, when is he ever going to see the field on third downs? I don't know. Now I'm hoping that, and the only way this defensive line rotation makes somewhat sense to me is that they move JFM more to the inside because you have so many edge rushers. Like if JFM is going to stay on the outside during an edge rush situation, he's getting $14-15 million a year. So you're going to play him. And then you have Lawson who can make up to 12. And then where does that leave Huff and McDonald? So I think JFM will kick a little bit more to the inside, which is really where he made his money with the Jets prior to getting signed. He was more to the inside, and obviously by necessity he went to the defensive end spot. But so I think he's kicked more inside, and that gives some more freedom for the staff to play, the McDonald's and the Huffs of the world. But JJ is a guy, he's really good in the run game. I thought he was a plus run defender in year one. He made plenty of plays. He had that big sack on Josh Allen where you see his tackle radius. So I thought he was pretty good. I still think he has a ways to go as a pass rusher. And I said that about him coming out of FSU, where a lot of people were saying like, oh, top 5 pick. I'm like, the guy's going to I think he's going to go late first round just because of his lack, not lack of ability to pass rush, but he is really indecisive and he runs his feet too much. And then he doesn't really stack moves well. So like, there's little things he had to work on, but really good run defender. And I don't think he's going to get much of he's not going to be much of a pass rush role this year. So we won't really see that too much. And then Huff is a guy too. Like, what's going to happen with him? Because if he balls out, do you sign him? Do you not sign him? Because at the end of the day, if he is just as productive last year, you're assuming he'll get a decent contract, and the Jets may bring him back and say, hey, we'll play you, for the pass rush reps. But then there's going to be another team out there who's going to say, hey, we'll pay you to be a run defender too, and we'll pay you a lot more. So is he re-signed this upcoming year? I think probably next year it's one of him or Lawson who's back. I'd probably bet on Huff, but I'm not so sure. But yeah, I want to see him play more. I don't think 17 to 20% of the reps is enough for what he offered last year. And then with JJ, he's gonna have another year baking in terms of pass rushing, and he needed it because again, I don't think he's as good of a pass rusher as some think he is, but he'll be the base end on first and second down with guys like JFM just setting that edge. But I'm excited for both of them.
So now the next player is probably the least talked about first round pick I've ever had, because when they picked him, I didn't know who he was. I was like, Will McDonald, who the hell is that, and why do we get him? I was thinking like we're gonna go receiver. I thought maybe Cansey from Pittsburgh. He was. I didn't. To be honest, dude, I didn't even think pass rusher in the first round. It wasn't even on my radar. So they picked him. I'm like, what the fuck? So I'm like, all right, let me go Google up real quick and YouTube and all this other shit. But now that you've had time to digest it and look at it, everybody knows his bend, his explosive nature, his wingspan, his athletic ability. What do you think about McDonald and a fit in this defense?
I'm assuming he jumps over cars, right? So yeah, and I was the same as you. Like I didn't, and we talked a little bit pre-show. Like I was not into the draft at all this year, so I saw his name pop up like late first, early second round guys. But like when they draft, I'm like what? Because I was with a couple buddies. I didn't stream during the draft. I want to hang out and like have an actual life outside of streaming and stuff like that. But I was drinking. Like a couple of my friends looked at me like, so what's this guy about? I'm like, I have no idea. Like I'll tell you in a couple of days. I don't really know who this guy is. Now, before the draft, just looking at where the board was falling, you're assuming tackle, you're assuming Cansey, like you said, which would have been really redundant with Quentin Jefferson. He doesn't really offer much in the run game, and he has historically short arms. Like there's never been a guy with as short an arm as he has who have been productive in the NFL. It's never happened before, so he could be the one outlier out of thousands,
right?
But it's still pretty sketchy. And then past that, we were thinking like, Jackson Smith, or we were thinking, Quentin Johnson, all that stuff. But with that being said, you'd be bringing in one of those guys to then cut Corey Davis most likely. So does that make sense? I'm not really so sure. And I D-end like trickled into my mind just because of how much of a psychopath Saleh is with defensive ends and things like that. But I still didn't know who he was. I like the player. You've obviously heard, which is very true, that he was miscast at Iowa State, playing 4-eye, inside shoulder of the tackle, or even just heads up with a tackle as a 4-tech. And at 240 pounds, 238 pounds, it's just not what you want to do. It's just what they did with Iowa State system. He would penetrate a lot in the B gap, and they wanted the runs to bounce to the outside where they had their corners crashing down to the outside. So they really try to just spread the offense out and let their guys rally and make tackles. So that's kind of what their defense tried to do. And he did it, relatively well for his size, but he's just always going to be miscast there. I think he has underrated power for his size, 240. I think his frame, you can easily put another 10 to 15 pounds on, make him 250, 255. Really effective edge rusher. There's some things he needs to work on just in terms of setting up his track to offensive linemen a little bit better. There's sometimes he doesn't necessarily close up enough ground, doesn't threaten enough, and doesn't really make the tackle change or footwork. Again, little technical things I can get into, or I'll get into it with his game, but really good pass rusher, really elite bend, elite length, elite wingspan. And there's a couple of things like I really need from pass rushers if they're going to be productive. You need that length, you need that bend, you need that explosion, you need that flexibility. He has all that stuff. He has the technique. The only thing he needs to develop a little bit is some technique and a little bit of power. But I think he's going to be a guy who can be a really, really good pass rusher as a wide 9 for the Jets. Now, are they going to play him over Huff? That's another question. We'll see about that. But I think a really productive edge rusher in year 1 who's going to turn the heat up on quarterbacks, especially when he's not playing a lot of reps. And then down the road, when he's adding 10, 15 pounds of muscle, he can easily do it. Especially considering the guy, like I know that people are saying he's 23 years old, so how much more can he develop? But I think he started playing football his junior year of high school. So he doesn't have a lot of tread off the tires. He has plenty more to learn, plenty more mass to build. So year 1, productive edge rusher, whether it be like 5, 6, 7 sacks, hopefully. And then years to come, I think he develops his run game a little bit more because he could do it. It's just he can't do it as a 4-eye. So.
And I think the cool thing is that he's not being brought in to be like the game-changing player week 1. Yeah. He's not going to be a 15-sack guy this year. Like, there's no pressure, dude. You have Lawson, you have Huff, you have Jermaine Johnson. Like, he's just a piece, like a piece of the puzzle that you can learn along the way with great mentors. Now he's got a lot of guys you can learn from, which is awesome. So it's a perfect situation for him with a defensive-minded coach and Saleh, which is even good. Now, the one position that kind of scares me a little bit is safety, because Jordan Whitehead, I mean, I was a big fan of his. Disappointing year. You have Clark they traded for. You have Tony Adams. You have Will Parks. I mean, I'm kind of worried about the range, like a free safety kind of role and who they're going to go with. But what are your thoughts on the safety position?
Yeah, Whitehead was not one of my favorite signings. I get the big hits and stuff, but I turned on his first game against the Falcons. I think he missed 3 tackles on Cordell Patterson. I'm like, oh, here we go. So he had a bad year. I kind of expected him to. I didn't expect it to be that bad, but to me, what the Jets should do, are they going to do it? No. I cut Jordan Whitehead. You save the $7.5 million. You go out there, you sign a John Johnson for $4 or $5 million. He's the free safety. You play Chuck Clark at the strong safety. Right now, it doesn't seem like they're going to do that. But with that being said, they signed Morgan Moses late. They signed Quan late. They signed Dwayne Brown late. So it could still happen. But you think if it was going to, like they would have already done it. So I'm not so sure. I think they envision one of Clark or Whitehead playing that hybrid linebacker safety role. Yeah. You see a lot in Clark's film with the Ravens. He was basically a dime nickel backer. He was in the box. He was playing linebacker roles. He was playing hooks. He was playing curl the flats and threes and things like that. So he can play that linebacker role. So I think what they're going to do, at least as the roster is presently constructed, is you play again Whitehead or Clark in the box as that pseudo linebacker. The other one's a strong safety, and then Adams is the free safety. And I like Adams. I was a part of like the Tony Adams hive when he got initially picked up as a UDFA, and he was good in the preseason, and he was good even at the end of the year. Like if you go back and watch his Seattle and Miami game, I believe it was Miami too. He actually did really, really well. But again, is that a large enough sample size? Like if we were year one Zach Wilson, year two Sam Darnold, and we had a buffer year to say, okay, well, let's run him out there. We're going to go 5-12 anyway. Let's see if he can develop. That's not the case right now. Like, and this is just it is what it is for Jets fans. Of course, the year would be really good. It's probably the most stacked AFC we've literally ever seen. Yep. So, do you trust Tony Adams enough in a 1 or 2 game sample size to be going up against the likes of Josh Allen and Patrick Mahomes and Lamar Jackson and Justin Herbert and all these guys that we're gonna have to get through? You love to say, okay, yeah, just develop the young guys, but it's just not enough. It's not enough of a sample size for me to be comfortable. So I'm hoping that they bring in some veteran, assurances. Again, John Johnson, maybe there's a splash move left for the Jets, because you look at the roster, but they went after Odell. They went after Fletcher Cox. They went after Orlando Brown. They haven't really made a big splash since they went out for those guys. So is there a move for a safety out there? Now, maybe not like a true good free safety would really bring this defense in contention and maybe the best in the league. I think they're really lacking at that free safety spot. And if you can get, I know Kevin Byard right now is sitting out of OTA practice. Yep. If you can get a guy like that to this defense, dude, like, holy shit, this defense can legitimately be number one. And obviously, maybe there's a Quan back. So I have some questions about safety as well. Again, what I think is going to happen, at least as of right now, is Adams is the free safety. And then Whitehead and Clark are the pseudo nickel backer, dime backer, and strong safeties, which I don't agree with. Again, I just don't. I don't see a world where Jordan Whitehead's worth, I think it's $10.5 million, it's $7.5 if you cut him. So I think there's a better player out there for that price.
Now, you mentioned him before. Like I'm kind of surprised Quan's not back already, but I know he waited long last time. Could be doing the same thing this time. Maybe he wants more than 1 year, maybe wants 2 years or 3 years. But are you high on Quan coming back, or do you have some kind of confidence in Sherwood?
No, like Sherwood, I like who he is as a player, and I like him maybe more of a Mike Backer, more of that CJ Mosley role, because he's not a guy like in solid system. Linebackers, 4-3 linebackers are generally the same, but whether it be Sam or a Will, you're not necessarily in the middle of the play, so you're going to be running chase a little bit more. And Sherwood, I know he was a safety at Auburn, but he was never an athletic freak type of guy. Like he has big wingspan, all that stuff, but he's pretty slow even for a linebacker. So I don't see him being a great fit in terms of just the range they ask these linebackers to cover in this system. So he could be the answer, but I would be pretty concerned. I think more realistically, it would be Clark or Whitehead filling that third linebacker type of role, and the Jets go a little bit lighter. They're running those big nickel sets and all that stuff where, you might give it up a little bit in the run game, but our coverage is going to be really good from the linebackers, because we struggled in the run game last year, but we also struggled. Look at the Pats. Like a couple of games we played the Pats, all they did was run like tight end crossers and just make our linebackers click and close and make good, tackles in space. And Quincy is good at tackling sometimes, but every 1 or 2 tackles he makes that is really good, he has one bust.
Yep.
So that's how teams have started attacking the Jets. So I'm a little bit concerned about that third linebacker. I'm hoping Quan is back. Last year he signed for $1.5 million. If you can get him at $3 or $4 million this year, I think that would be a move that's worth making. And you see like how the guys talk about it. I don't know how much you pour into chemistry and things like that. I think it matters more than most
too.
others do. And they love Quan, like in that locker room last year. And he you would not see him for a while, and he'd absolutely destroy a guy like out of nowhere. So I really like what he offers to the game. I like the explosiveness. So I would really like to see him signed again. $2-3 million. You cut Whitehead and you sign another free safety. And you let Quan play that role, but we'll see what they do. Obviously, they have plenty of time to figure that out.
So we spent almost 50 minutes breaking down a good portion of the roster. I mean, Sauce and DJ Reed, we know, are two great corners, and Sauce will only get better. But if you're looking at this team, what is the ceiling for this team? What do you like? What's a realistic expectation for this team? Listen, I'm all in, man. So I'm already out of my mind. But if you look at this team, they have a lot of strengths, they have some weaknesses, but so does every other team in the NFL. You also have Aaron Rodgers. Like, what's realistic for this team? Like, compete for the AFC East, 11 wins, 12 wins. What do you think?
The ceiling is them playing on my birthday in the Super Bowl, February 4th. 31 years old. They're gonna be that's the day that hopefully they'll be playing in the Super Bowl on that day. They have the chance to. Rodgers is still at worst a top 5, 6, 7 quarterback, and you're looking at a defense where you're talking about who and I know that some BS site put out the cornerback rankings and they had a Dolphins above the Jets, which is ridiculous, dude. Look, just go back and watch Xavier Howard last year and tell me they're a top deal. He struggled big time last year. So you're talking about legitimately, and this is not Fangol or anything like that, the best corner group, the entire group. Even Eccles and Hall are still there, who are really good depth pieces. You're talking about the best corners in the NFL. You're talking about an argument of a top 3 defensive line between them, the Niners and the Eagles. So top 3 defensive line, a top corner duo in the league. So top 5 defense. And with this offense, I don't think they're necessarily stacked. I think the receivers are solid. I think the tight ends are solid. I think the running game can be very good. I think the offensive line could be solid, or at least okay. But then that all gets elevated by Aaron Rodgers, where we've seen obviously offenses where it was obviously, dragged down by the quarterback in years past. But they can play in the Super Bowl. They can play in the Super Bowl. Somebody said February 11th, which is breaking my heart. But hopefully it's the 4th, and you're wrong, Michael. But so I think it's a Super Bowl. You need that elite quarterback, and he still could be that elite quarterback. Now, is he 2020 Aaron Rodgers? Maybe not, but I don't think he's the Aaron Rodgers you saw last year. And again, going back and watching what I did of him in 2022, I thought it was going to be more discouraged than I was. I was pretty encouraged. I saw a lot of drops. I saw a lot of problems with the offense. He did have his struggles, but I still think you're talking about top 5 to 6, quarterback in the league this year. And you look at our roster compared to like the Bills. Where do the Bills have better talent than the Jets? Quarterback, receivers. Okay, you got Diggs, but I might take what the Jets have. Running back, they don't really have much. Their offensive line's falling apart. Von Miller might not be healthy for week 1. They've lost some guys on their defensive line. Trey White's not what he was. Matt Lamont is a great linebacker, but they lost Tremaine Edmonds. So tell me where the Bills are better. So win the AFC East, home playoff game, which I cannot imagine. Again, no. We got after it at week 1. I cannot imagine a home playoff game. So it's going to be Super Bowl. Super Bowl is the ceiling. And if it's not, and if you don't think that's the ceiling, or if the Jets don't think that's the ceiling, then why do this? And another kind of that I know I think you have a stream in like 8 minutes, but with the Jets now, do they make that splash move? Because you see the rumors out there for Hopkins, you see all this stuff. We can't go half in. If you think you're going for the Super Bowl, go in for the Super Bowl. So I think there may still be a splash left from the Jets. It's just I wouldn't guarantee it, but I would look out for it.
No, I'm with you, dude. I make every move possible. Keep upgrading, keep finding ways, because this is it. You're in the hunt. You're literally in the hunt. You have a quarterback that's the equalizer. He can keep you in every game and can win you every game. And that's we haven't had that in freaking 20 years. So it's ridiculously exciting. I can't wait, man. I'm ready for the season. I don't even want training camp. Give me week 1. Jets, Bills, crazy stadium. Mm-hmm. We'll be doing shotguns. I can't wait for that. But for those of you that don't know you, because we upload this on our podcast network too. Give all your information out, man, because you drop all kinds of information. You do great film breakdowns and everything else.
Yeah, I appreciate that. By the way, I think we did shotguns and shots. It wasn't just a shotgun. It's a shotgun followed by a shot. It's okay.
It was ridiculous.
So I walked back stumbling, and people are like, what is wrong? I was like, I don't know what happened. It's a crazy 30 minutes. But so Joe RB31 on Twitter. I post a lot of threads and stuff there of players and throws and highlight plays and stuff like that. Some more of the technical analysis is behind the paywall because I put a lot of hours into it. So you can follow me, Joe RB31 on Twitter, Blewett Splits on YouTube, Jets X Factor, which we're one of the proud owners of that website. Follow me there, and you'll have plenty of reviews in the offseason. I think I have a almost 200 play Aaron Rodgers review coming out. So you have plenty of film to get caught up on there.
No, I love it, dude. When you start doing your threads, I watch a lot of stuff, man. Because it's just like, and like you're relatable. Like, I understand what you're saying. I don't get like lost and shit. I'm like, I understand what he's saying here. So it's awesome, man. Great site, great interview. Thank you for your time, man. I know it's it's the off season, Memorial, the weekend's coming up, and everything else. So I appreciate it. And then week 1, we'll go back at it again. We got to do beer pong this time now.
Yeah, so I'm prepared. I'm mentally preparing myself to walk over to your tailgate. I already planned all of my trips. I got season tickets for the first time in a couple of years this year, because you know what it was like season tickets.
Yeah.
A couple of years ago, you're paying $70-$80 a game, and then when the game time actually comes, like I think I got tickets and it was about $80 a pop, like technically for the seats, and then you go to a game, it's like $12. It's like, why the hell am I buying season tickets? So I bought them before Aaron Rodgers came, so I'll be at all the games. Dallas week 2, I'll be there. So
going to Vegas.
Maybe.
You gotta go to Vegas, dude. You gotta go to Vegas.
Maybe we'll figure it out. We'll figure it out. My buddy has he's part of like a sports merchandising company, and he might get free tickets from me, so I might see you out in Vegas too.
Perfect. Joe, thank you so much for your time, man. Definitely appreciate it. I'm sure I'll talk to you during training camp and like that, and then we'll hang out week 1.
All right, man. Appreciate you having me on.
Thank you, man. All right, just